welcome or welcome back to the channel. My name is Kind, and in today's video I will be going over the builds for Vladimir. Now, I have never gotten this many requests to make a video about Vladimir items, which is weird because I feel like in the past sometimes it was a bit more unclear, and now it's kind of clear what to build, but there are a lot of options, right? In the past you didn't have as many options, but now you have so many options to the point where some people might be getting overwhelmed. I have no idea. But for me right now, it's honestly kind of like really rational what to buy. So I'm going to make this video to solve those issues for you guys so that you really have a good idea of what to build in your next games. Now, of course, let's start with the boring stuff here, the early buys, right? When you are level 1, you start the game, you have to build a starting item. I'm going to be honest with you guys, in 100% of my games, so all my games, I just go Doran's Ring. Theoretically, you go this in fistfight matchups, and then you would go Doran's Shield in very difficult poke matchups, so people who can constantly poke you, like a Victor, a Syndra, an Anivia, and then a Dark Seal, you could go in very easy matchups. That is the theory behind it. However, I just like Doran's Ring so much, I know the limits of it, I feel so confident on it, so I always go it. I think it's currently a great starting item, and it's the best starting item in my opinion. Then Doran's Shield, the thing is, you should go this in very difficult matchups that can constantly poke you, right? Like the Victor, like the Syndra, like the Anivia. The thing with that is, I don't feel like players that play those champions are good enough to punish me super hard in lane to the point where I would need this, right? And I'm not talking about lower elo, I'm talking about higher elo as well, right? I feel like there has been a shift from lane dominance towards more scaling setups in the lane, and then being super aggressive for those objective team fights, like dragon fights and baron fights and all that. So I feel like people have started to become a little bit more lenient in lane, and they stopped punishing me as much in the current meta, right? And therefore, I don't really see a need for Doran's Shield. I didn't really have any game so far where I'm like, oh, I really need the Doran's Shield. I picked it a couple of times in Anivia matchups, but then afterwards I always regret it because they are not punishing me enough and I don't get the true value from it. So therefore, I would recommend just go Doran's Ring in all the matchups. But yes, if you wanted to go Dark Seal, you could in very easy matchups, and you could go Doran's Shield in very difficult matchups. But again, you shouldn't need it. You could just go with D-Ring every single game. With that being said, I do like to go Dark Seal in every build that I go. So I always build it either on the first recall or on the second recall. Why? It's a super gold efficient item. Every AP champion in the game, in my opinion, should just build it, even if you're a support. It's turbo gold efficient, and therefore you should just buy it. Don't worry, it doesn't mean that if you have a Dark Seal that you have to upgrade it into a Magi's, but I do believe you should build Dark Seal. And keep in mind, for those Vladimir players out here, Dark Seal is even more gold efficient on you than on any other mage champ because of your passive. So I typically buy it on first or second recall. How do I decide whether it's first or second recall? Well, it depends, right? If I have like 1.2k gold on my first recall, which is very rare, but then I will just build a needlessly large rod, right? Because how often do you have that amount of gold, right? Not a lot, so then just build a needlessly large rod. You know, you don't have place for Dark Seal. Or when you have enough gold for a Hextech Alternator when you're building Rocket Belt, right? So you want to build this Hextech Alternator component, is 1.1k gold. You could go with like Amp Tone, Dark Seal, and then Boots of Speed, or you could just build the Hextech Alternator, right? So then I typically prefer the Hextech Alternator because it's such a big power spike, and then I will just pick up the Dark Seal on my second recall. So yeah, if you have enough gold for a very big power spike, I would still skip this and buy it on my second recall. Otherwise, if I recall with like 700, 800 gold, I will just go Dark Seal on my first recall. Alright, that's it for the buying, or like the boring stuff of this video. Now let's move on to the bit more interesting part. So before we look into specific builds here, what I want to do is I want to talk about what in my opinion are currently all the viable items for Vladimir at this moment. So of course we have Rocket Belt, we have Storm Surge, Avoid stuff, nothing crazy here. Morellonomicon, I know people don't like to buy this on Vladimir. It's the same for me, the item isn't that good in my opinion, but sometimes you just have to buy it because frankly, Vladimir does apply this really well to an entire team, both with your E and your ultimate. So you are really good at applying this on an entire team comp, but the item is just not that good. And since you're playing a hyper carry, that's where the issue is. You're playing this hyper carry, but you have to build a shit item, but it kind of is good when they have a lot of healing because it does apply to an entire team. So I do feel like people that play Vladimir, they do underestimate the value of Morellonomicon. They feel like it's a shit item, but again, you really only build it when they have like a lot of healing, when they have like Ivern Soraka or something, or like a Karma with like an Aatrox in the top lane, right? Then you build the Morellonomicon and you really do a good job of applying it to the entire team. So honestly, in those scenarios, it's just a good item on Vladimir and it's also not that expensive. So yes, you can still buy this, even though it's not the best item on Vladimir, as long as you build it in the right scenarios. What are those right scenarios? When the enemy team have lots of healing, right? If they have one person with healing, like they have like an Aatrox, but then no other healing in the team, well, tell your support, for example, to build the anti-heal. But if they have like multiple people with healing, then Vladimir is really good with his AoE damage to apply Morellonomicon to the entire team. All right, and then another one, a bit of a controversial one. I don't really see a lot of Vladimir players build this, Blood Letters Curse, right? Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later about this. You're going to see that here. Now, the reason why I do like this item on Vladimir is it gives you all the stats that you need. It gives you and AP, and HP, and ability haste, and magic pen in one item, right? And granted, it's not the biggest amount of AP or the biggest amount of shred, but it's a really good item because it gives you that versatility of stats. So that's why I do like it. I have been experimenting with building it and I'm enjoying it a lot. But more about that later. Banshees, of course, you go this when the enemy team has key abilities that you need to dodge, like a Fiddlesticks ult or something, right? Or when they have lots of AP. Now, typically what I do is I build this when they have lots of AP, but if they have Fiddlesticks or they have Diana, something like that, or a Karthus ult, you could also go Zhonya's, right? Even though those ults are AP, you can all Zhonya's them. So if you are building Banshees against a spell that you can also Zhonya's, I think generally speaking, Zhonya's is just a better item. So I mainly go Zhonya's here to make sure that I can dodge those crazy AoE spells like Fiddlesticks are, Diana are, right? And then I go Banshees really when they just have lots of AP. Now keep in mind, some of those AoE spells are very difficult to dodge. Like Fiddlesticks ult, sometimes they just surprise you and you're not in time to Zhonya's, right? So then Banshees Veil is pretty good into that. But into a Diana ult, you have time to Zhonya's it, so then Zhonya's is better, right? So it very much depends here on can you Zhonya's those big AoE ults or not, or is it very difficult to do so? Then you could go with the Banshees. Or do they have key abilities that you need to dodge, like a Twisted Fate Gold card or something? Then Banshees Veil could also be really, really useful. Now, with that being said, again, I mainly go this when the enemy team has lots of AP and I don't care too much about the shield, right? Then Horizon Focus, I do think this is an item that is viable on Vladimir, but it's far from optimal. So you get a lot of AP and ability haste. Now, in my opinion, I don't like this because on Vladimir, I like having... So Vladimir really works off 3 stats. HP, so health, ability power, AP, and... I forgot it, Jesus Christ. So AP, HP, and ability haste, right? There we go. So this item only gives 2 out of 3. It only gives AP, ability haste, but no health, right? So this is more of a glass cannon build. You're going to be a bit squishier, but you will have lots of AP. Now, the problem that I have with this item is the champion identity, right? So, okay, you don't get the HP from it. You do get a lot of AP, so you should be able to one-tap people, but you're going to be squishy. But isn't it better then to just go something like Storm Surge, which gives you also 90 AP, and flat magic penetration, which is also really, really good, and is going to deal more damage against people with low MR. Right? Now, if people are building magic resist, then you could go with Horizon Focus, but in those games, I still don't want to go that item. Why not? Well, let me explain, right? So, if they have no magic resist, items with flat magic penetration like Storm Surge and Shadow Flame are really good items, right? If they do build magic resist, then you could argue, well, building items with flat magic penetration is just a lot of loss in value, so you shouldn't build those items. But then building items with no magic penetration at all also doesn't feel that good, right? So then you know that in those games where you don't want to build Storm Surge and Shadow Flame, at some point you're going to have to build a Void Staff, right? And then the best way to do that is by going a build that gives you all the stats early on so that you can build your Void Staff as a third or fourth item. Meaning that you already have your death cap as a third item, so you can definitely build Void Staff as a fourth item and you don't stall it till a fifth or sixth item, because in those games where the enemy builds magic resist, you need that Void Staff at the least as a fourth item and maybe as a third item. So then going something like Cosmic Death Cap Void, where you have your Void Staff as a third item, is really good when enemies are building magic resist, right? But then there's no place for the Horizon Focus, because then you would have to change your Cosmic Drive for Horizon Focus, which you could, right? But then you would not have that movement speed that Vladimir so desperately needs, right? And you would also lack a bit of HP survivability. So I'm still not really a big fan of this item because it does lack in HP and it doesn't have a clear identity, if you know what I mean. Now, if you are someone who has a great Horizon Focus build, please let me know and I'll be happy to test it out. But that is my problem with the item. It doesn't have a clear identity. Then Crit Bloom is a great item, Riftmaker good, Cosmic Drive is good, Liandry's is good. All these items are all fine. Magi's is good when you have like 10 Dark Seal stacks, you upgrade it into the Magi's, and there you go. Just be aware, I only go this in very desperate games, so when the game is looking really, really bad, that's when I like to go Magi's. For the very reason of, in a game where the game goes really bad, you're going to need a miracle. And then building Magi's, and if you're lucky enough it stacks, now you get the damage to get that miracle and win the game, right? So I go this when the game is looking really, really lost, or when the game is looking really, really won. When your entire team is doing fine and you're doing good, then you can also build this to accelerate the lead a little bit more. When I see people build this though, when their team is doing poor and they're doing amazing, that's when they build the Magi's. But I feel like that's really a bad moment to build the Magi's, because if your team is doing poor and you're doing good, you're the only thing that stands between the enemies just killing your Nexus, right? So if you screw up and you put all your gold in this coin flippy item that's Magi's, if they kill you once, now a lot of your damage is gone, a lot of your gold is gone, and now they just get to steamroll you and your team. So when you're the strongest force in the team and your teammates are not doing that great, don't build the Magi's. Put your gold into something like a death cap, for example. But again, if you are winning as a whole, like your entire team and you are doing really good, then go Magi's. Or if the game is looking really bad, you can also go Magi's for that miracle to happen, right? And then last but not least, this is a bit more of a tanky item. Are tanky items on Vladimir like Frozen Heart and stuff, are they viable? Yes. Do I go them in the current meta? No. And I'll talk about that later, but in the current meta, I like to buy items with HP and AP. And those tank items, yeah, they typically only give HP and no AP. So in the current meta, I like building items that have both ability haste, ability power, and health. Tank items do not fall under that category because they don't give the damage. That's why I don't like it, right? I feel like you can be tanky enough. There are so many items on Vladimir that give you both ability haste, HP, and AP, right? So that is why I feel like you are already tanky enough if you build those damage items. So you don't need any more tank items in the current meta. With that being said, I did include Spirit Visage here because I do believe it could be a great addition to your build as like a last item or like a second to last item if you have a lot of healing on your team. This item, you don't buy it if enemies have a lot of AP. You only buy this if enemies have a lot of AP and you have a lot of healing on your team. You have like a Soraka or a Karma and an Ivern or right, those kind of champions. If you have lots of healing on your team, right, or like shielding on your team as well, like a Karma, for example, is a great champion, then you could consider picking this up. So for example, enemies have like Kassadin mid lane, Fiddlesticks jungle, Lux support, right? And you're playing Vlad, so you want to build some magic resist, and then you have like a Karma support. Now you could pick this up because the heal and the shield from Karma with this will be kind of good onto you, right? So keep that in mind. And the same with Soraka, those kind of champions, right? With Ivern, those kind of champions. Now, again, I don't build this a lot, right? I really build this like once every 50 games or something like that. Because you don't really get a lot in those scenarios where the enemy team has lots of AP, you need to build some magic resist, and you have healing on your team. You don't get that scenario a whole often. So yeah, but yeah, once you get that scenario, it could be a good item. And then we have the boots, right? I'm going to talk about the boots here first. So in my opinion, there are 3 boots that are viable on Vlad, and I should probably put them in this position. Now, could you build Mercury threads and like tabbies, right? The plated steel caps, I think it's called. Yeah. So could you build those items? Yes. If the enemy team is like basically full AD and have lots of auto-attacking champ, you can go with the armor boots. If they have like an insane amount of AP on their team, like 4 or 5 AP champs with lots of CC, sure, go the Mercury threads, right? But that basically never happens. So in 99% of the games, you're going to want to go one of these 3 boots. In my opinion, it's really simple. If I am solo AP in my team, or like almost solo AP, so I don't have a lot of AP on the team except for me, I like to go sorcery shoes. Right. So when you are playing Vladimir mid, you have a kill top lane, I'm not going to buy this. Because we have too much AP on the team, 2 hyper carries, the enemy team is going to stack magic resist. And then these shoes are not that good. Right. Again, you have to take this with a side note, right? Flat magic penetration from like items like Storm Stir, Shadow Flame, Sorcery Shoes gets calculated after percentage magic penetration. So if enemies stack magic resist, your Sorcery Shoes are bad until you build a Void Staff. If you have a Void Staff and then you have Sorcery Shoes, now the Sorcery Shoes actually have a lot of value. So the problem that I have is, if you build boots early on, when enemies will probably start building some magic resist, right? Until you have that Void Staff, or like, let me say it differently. If you rush these boots, right? Even if you have a lot of AP in your team, and the enemy will stack magic resist, what's going to happen? Well, they're not going to stack magic resist as their first item, right? They're probably going to build it starting from their second or third item. That means that for like the first couple of minutes in the game, you have value from the sorcery shoes. Once they start building their magic resist items, like a Spirit Visage or something like that, or a Rookern, right? Now, these boots become useless. Then, once you build your Void Staff, these boots become useful again. But the period where these boots become useless is when you don't have the Void and where the enemies have some magic resist. I kind of want to avoid that. So, could you build Sorcery Shoes when you are not solo AP in your team, when you have like a kill in your team? Sure, but just know you are on a timer. Like, you can rush them and get lots of value from them in the lane, and if you can do that, if you are playing in a matchup that you can kill if you go these boots early on, sure, go them, even though you have AP in your team, right? Because if it gives you a kill early on, it's still worth to go them, right? And then you just build your Void Stuff a little bit earlier than anticipated, like as a third item, and now the boots are also relatively quickly useful again. Hopefully that makes sense. But as a general rule, if you didn't really understand that, you can ask me in the questions. But as a general rule, if you are solo AP or almost solo AP on your team, then you can go these boots. Otherwise, I don't think you should go them. Now, if it's not an angle for these boots, so if you are not solo AP on your team, we have 2 other boots that we mainly go. Ionian boots and Swifties. Now, first and foremost, Swifties are really good against slows. So if the enemy team has something like an Ashe and a Zillion, right? Those kind of champions, then it's really good to go Boots of Swiftness, right? But again, I typically will go, like even if they have a lot of slows in the enemy team, I typically will go for Sorcery Shoes if I am solo AP on my team. I only opt for the other boots when the Sorcery Shoes are not an option. I really want to make that clear. All right, so then if these boots are not good, then we can look at, does the enemy team have lots of slows? If yes, you can buy the Boots of Swiftness. What is another scenario where you can buy these boots, right? When the enemy team are full ranged. These boots give just more flat movement speed than the other boots. So if the enemy teams have a very long range team, like Ashe, Valkos in the bot lane, Xerath mid lane, these boots are just going to make sure that you can kite them a little bit easier, you can dodge their skill shots a bit easier, and you can get onto them a bit easier. So that's also why these boots could be valuable into those longer range team comps. And then another scenario is when enemies like to run you down. So let's think of a Cassiopeia, right? A Cassiopeia likes to run you down with like Q and E, right? So then this gives you extra movement speed to dodge the Qs and to walk away from her. And also Cassiopeia, her W slows, so it will be less effective. She likes to build items like a Rylai Scepter, which also has a 30% slow, and then that's also good against it, right? Also for Vladimir top lane players, I feel like Boots of Swiftness, they should build this a lot more than the mid lane Vladimir main. Why? If you're top lane, you will face champions like Renekton, Fiora, Nessus, Tryndamere, those champions that have slows and that just like to run you down in general. And then these boots are good. Like Renekton, he doesn't have a slow, but like these boots are still great into Renekton players because he likes to run you down. And these boots are just really good against people who like to run you down. So if you are a top lane Vladimir main, look to go these boots into like Darius, Renekton, Fiora, Tryndamere, those kind of matchups, right? So yeah, that is all the explanation about the Boots of Swiftness. Now, if it's not an angle for Sorcery Shoes, it's not an angle for Swifties, you can also look to build Ionian Boots. When do you pick Ionian Boots? Well, Ionian Boots are good when the enemy's team is a bit more tanky and you are not solo AP on your team. If you have a kill top in your team, you're playing Vladimir, enemies are gonna build magic resist. So then it's better to have more ability haste, so more ability rotations onto them to kill them. Right. Now, one thing that is super important about these Ionian Boots is you have to rush these because that's how ability haste works in the game, right? If you have 20 ability haste early on, right? I don't know the math, so don't like judge me on this, but it's something like this, right? If you have like 20 ability haste in the early game, your Q cooldown might go from like 8 seconds to like 6.5, which is like 1.5 seconds difference. If you build 20 ability haste later on in the game, when your Q is already on a 4 second cooldown, it might maybe go from like 4 to 3.2 or something, right? Which is like half of the value that you would get if you build it early, right? So ability haste, the more you stack it, the later you get into the game, the more useless it becomes, right? Or the more diminishing returns you will have, right? Therefore, building ability haste early on is really valuable, so you should rush these boots. And again, when do you go them? When it's not an angle for Sorcery Shoes, so when you are not solo AP, and when enemies are not running you down or are super long ranged in those scenarios as well, or have no slows. Then you can build those Ionian Boots and you should rush them. Alright, that was a lot of information about boots, but again, this is the ultimate guide for builds on Vladimir, so I wanted to give you guys all the possible information here and leave nothing to fate, right? I really wanted to discuss everything. All right, then we go to this category here, and here, these are just the items that I like. These are the items that I love right now. And why is that? All of these items, they have AP, HP, and ability haste. Each one of these items, HP, AP, and ability haste, right? Now, there's one item here that doesn't have it. It's Liandry's. Liandry's doesn't have the ability haste part. Why did I still include it? Well, I noticed that the current meta is a little bit more bruiser, right? Like there are many games where enemies pick bruiser champs, tanky champions. I believe that's because we are currently in a fist fight meta with the objectives. People don't play for lane. They play for dragon fights, herald fights, void grubs, baron, right? They play Atakan. There are so many objectives that people pick like those bruiser type champions that are really good in those extended fights for those objectives, right? Therefore, I believe that Liandry's Torment is in the current meta, even though they nerfed it a while ago, is still a great item because you get so much max health damage from this item, right? So that's why I included why I still like this item a lot, even though it doesn't give all 3 of those stats. But these 4 items all give those stats, ability haste, AP, and health, which is really, really good. Now, something else I also wanted to mention. So first and foremost, these items are really good. That's why I like to build them every single game, right? Then here, something I wanted to note before we go deeper into the builds, the 3rd and 4th item slot. If you are a mage, and this is not just Vladimir specific, but almost for every mage specific, you need a Void Staff and a Death Cap at some point in your build. Because a full build mage, people will build magic resist against you. So you need magic penetration. It could also be a crit bloom, right? It doesn't have to be a Void Staff. But or like it could be a Bloodletter's Curse, right? Something with magic penetration or magic shred, right? And you will need a death cap, right? It's just the core item of those mage champions. So at some point you will need either a magic penetration item and a Rabbathon's death cap. Now, when do you build this? Typically, I like to build it my death cap as a third item and my void staff or crit bloom or Bloodletter's Curse as a fourth item, or the other way around. It depends on the game, right? If I notice that as a third, when I'm building my death cap or when I'm about to build my first death cap component, enemies are not building magic resist yet, then I build my death cap. If I notice that when I want to start building my third item, enemies are already building lots of magic resist, I will first build my magic penetration item and then my death cap. But stalling these items further makes no sense. Why? Specifically on Vladimir as well, you are a hyper scaling champion. The biggest power spike that you will have in the game is when you finish your death cap, right? Your third item slot, if you finish death cap for your third item slot, you will finish that item close to like 28 minutes in the game or something. The average length of a game is around 30 minutes for all elos, or even a little bit less than that. So if you stall this till your fourth item, we're looking at like 32 minutes or something, which means that on average, you do not get your death cap. And that is a big issue when you play a hyperscaling mage. So therefore, I like a third item death cap on Vladimir almost in every build, right? And then Void Staff is typically a fourth item because people will build magic resist against Vladimir. You are this hyperscaling mage. They need magic resist to save themselves from getting blown up. So therefore, having that Void Staff as a fourth item is just a great item as well. So that's my take on Death Cap and Void Staff, or like Crit Blue and Bloodletter's Curse in the Vladimir item slots. All right, so keep that in mind. Then we go to the first build that I like at this moment. Again, this might look a bit weird, but if you play versus ranged enemy champions, right? So what do I define as a ranged comp? I define this as 3 out of 5 enemy champions are ranged. So if it's 2 out of 5, if the enemy team has 3 bruisers and 2 ranged champions, I will not build Rocket Belt. You will see later what I will build. But if they have 3 out of 5, I will build Rocket Belt. And then again, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because it depends, right? If they have like a ranged support, typically I don't mind that much. I mainly look at the carries. Do they have ranged carry, so ranged mid laner and ADC, or melee mid laner and ADC? That also changes a lot, because they could have 3 ranged champions, but if their main carry champions are melee, then I could also not go Rocket Belt most of the time. But general rule to make it easy, 3 out of 5 enemy champions are ranged, go Rocket Belt. If not, go Cosmic Drive. But that is something I'm going to talk about later. All right. Second item. What do I like as a second item? Honestly, I could put every item here from this list. You could go Rocket Belt into Cosmic Drive for even more mobility. The only reason why I go Riftmaker here is, in my opinion, it doesn't make that much sense to go a Cosmic Drive after Rocket Belt. Why not? Well, what does Rocket Belt do? Why do you go Rocket Belt? Why is it one or the other and not both of them combined? Well, it's simple. Rocket Belt gives you a dash to get onto enemies. When do you have an issue getting onto enemies? When enemies are long ranged, right? So when they're long ranged, you struggle not with staying on top of them, because Vladimir has Ghost, Flash, his pool. You can stay on top of enemies, right? But you struggle to get onto them in the first place. That's why we need this dash. That's why Cosmic Drive doesn't make too much sense in those games, because Cosmic Drive, it gives you movement speed after dealing damage to a champion, so after attacking them. So if you go Cosmic Drive, you assume that you're going to be able to get onto the enemies easily, and now this helps you stick onto them, right? So that's the difference. They're like the opposite of each other. So you use Rocket Belt when enemies are very long range to get onto them in the first place, and then Cosmic Drive, you go it onto melee champions that are slippery, like bruiser champs, like an Ambessa. Like, it's easy to attack an Ambessa, but it's harder to stay on top of her because she will just constantly dash. It's the same with the Yasuo. It's easy to attack a Yasuo, but it's not easy to stay on top of him. And that's where Cosmic Drive comes in. That's why I either go Rocket Belt as a first item or I go Cosmic Drive as a first item. So into those shorter ranged comps, where 3 out of 5 enemy champions are short range or melee champions, I will go Cosmic Drive. If they are long range, I will go Rocket Belt. Right? That's why I don't put Cosmic Drive here after my Rocket Belt. Could you? Yes. Like it still synergizes as well, right? If you go Rocket Belt, you dash onto someone, then you have your Cosmic Drive to, like, once you get onto them with the dash, you attack them, you can stay onto them. So you can go Rocket Belt, Cosmic Drive, right? It's completely fine. But I don't enjoy it that much. I think you get more value from the Riftmaker. I feel like it's overkill to go Rocket Belt and Cosmic Drive. You don't need it, right? Because you also go Ghost Flash. Then I like to go Riftmaker. Why Riftmaker? Riftmaker is just really good in the meta right now, and it has always been on Vladimir. It's a great item on Vladimir. Why did I, back in the day, not build it this early in the build? Typically, I build it as a 4th item, because the passive here says, right, that you will deal more, like here, Void Infusion. I'll just read it. You gain 2% of your bonus health as ability power. Back in the day, you didn't build a first item that gave you health. Now Rocket Belt gives you quite a lot of health, which is already nice. That already fuels this passive here of the Riftmaker, giving you more AP by going Riftmaker here because you have a health item. That is why typically Riftmaker is really good in builds where you go a lot of health. Hence, I like to stack health. I like to stack Rocket Belt, 300 HP, Bloodletter's Curse, 400 HP, right? And then a Riftmaker, 350 HP. And now you get all this health and does a lot of AP out of your Riftmaker, right? That's why typically, if you already have all those health items and then you build a Riftmaker, this is like a death cap now. You get like so much AP from it, right? That's why building it later has a lot of value. But if you already have an HP item, I also still like it. And it just makes you tanky as hell. 300 HP plus 350 is insane. Or if you go Cosmic as well, 350 plus 350, it makes you tanky as hell. And what is the beautiful part of this? Vladimir just deals very high base damage. He's a champion with high base damage, like an Akali, for example. So you have the luxury of going these like HP builds and being tanky. And now you get to one-tap enemy teams, but they don't get to one-tap you, if that makes sense. So it's like, people say, oh, into squishies, I don't like this. No, it's like, into squishies, this is really nice. Because you can still one-shot them, and they can't one-tap you. Right? So that's why this build is like really good. It's good into bruisers, and it's good into squishies. So, really nice. Now, did I invent this build myself? Not really, right? I literally saw people in my game play Vladimir with this build. I gave it a try, and I absolutely love it. So credit to those players, right? But I'm enjoying it a lot. So this is currently my favorite build, Rocket Belt Riftmaker. And then again, as a 3rd item, I typically just like to go Death Cap and then Void Stuff as a 4th item. But again, you can play with this, right? You can literally play with this. So for example, let's say they built Magic Resist. So you have your Riftmaker here, and now they start building Magic Resist. Okay, go Void Stuff 3rd and then go your Death Cap, right? Or let's say you are really fat. So you build your Rocket Belt, and now you have like a triple kill, you have like 1.2k gold, you're really, really strong. Okay, you can build into your Riftmaker, into your Death Cap. What's the beautiful part of Riftmaker? Look, the build path is so easy. You have so many small components. So if you have like not a lot of gold, you can always build something. With Death Cap, you need to have 1.2k gold every time, right? So if you have that 1.2k gold, don't start building into this, start building into your Death Cap first, right? I sometimes even do this. I sometimes even build my Death Cap first item. And I know that sounds crazy, because sometimes you have a very late first recall where you have like 1.2k gold in base. And then I just spend it on the needlessly large rod, because in League, not too often, specifically not in the early stages of the game, do you get 1.2k gold. So then if you have that in one go, just spend it on that Death Cap, right? Put it in there, get that Death Cap annoying build path out of the way if you have 1.2k gold. So it's okay to skip Dark Seal, to skip your boots for this, if you can build this. Right? But most of the time, you just go into Rocket Belt, good build path in the early game. Then you might have a really good like triple kill or something, you have lots of gold, start building into your Death Cap, then build a Riftmaker. Right? Again, if you see that after Rocket Belt Death Cap, they start building Magic Resist, okay, go Void Stuff, and then go Riftmaker, for example. Right. So you can definitely play with this build, but most of the time it will happen that this is just a better build. Why? Because not a lot will you recall with 1.2k gold. And that means you will have to buy small components And then Riftmaker is made for that. So many small components, you always get to buy something when you come out of base. So this is typically what happens. And then here for last item, I always put Zhonya's here. You just want to put a game-specific item here. More often than not, it's going to be Zhonya's. Why? Vladimir has, like, if you have these items, you have enough damage to one-shot everybody. You have enough damage to get through tanks most of the time. So do you need anything more than a defensive item? Not really. Now is the time to build something more defensive, something more game-specific. But that could be a Magi's, that could be a Liandry's, that could be a Banshee's, that could be a Spear Visage. That could literally be any item in the game here. But I typically go with Zhonya's, right? It depends on the game, but I typically just go with Zhonya's. It's just a general, really good item on Vladimir if you already have a lot of damage items. All right, and then another build, a build that I liked in the beginning of this, when they buffed the crit bloom, I liked it in the beginning, but now I don't go this build ever anymore. Now, what is the good build about going Rocket Belt into crit bloom? The crit bloom is a magic penetration item, right? Now, the thing is, right, so keep this in mind. The thing is, so again, this is against range champion, right? You go Rocket Belt, you're playing versus range team comps. Now, why would you put a crit bloom in here and not a void staff? The thing is, so crit bloom is an item that gives you 20 ability haste. So the problem with the void staff, right? The problem with the void staff is, ideally, you could say, I want to build my death cap and my void staff as early as possible, because I know that I'm going to have to build those items. Those are core items in my build. Let's build them early, let's get them out of the way, and now for my 4th, 5th, and 6th item, I get to build whatever I want, right? The problem with that is that one, death cap is only good when you already have a couple of AP items to really increase that AP through its passive. So building it as a first item is not that ideal. You can still do it because of the build path, right? But like I explained a while ago, but still, it's better if you already have 1 or 2 items, right? And the more items you have, the more it's going to spike your death cap. So third item, in my opinion, is the best place to buy it. Void Staff, you could build it earlier, because what is the thing? So what is the thing with Void Staff? Well, at any point in the game, Vladimir only offers damage. You do not have CC or anything like that. You only offer damage. What is the problem with that? Well, they could counter you simply by building magic resist at any point in the game. Right. So building that Void Staff as a second item, for example, would mean that now they can't counter you anymore. Right? If they wanted to right now to build magic resist on their second item, but it doesn't matter, you already have the Void Staff. The moment you have this, they have very little tools or very few tools to counter you. So building Void Staff early would make a lot of sense from that perspective. Like, oh, checkmate, right? Enemies can't counter you now anymore. The problem is Void Staff is just not good early on, because it only gives that AP and magic penetration percentage-wise. The problem is, so now you're safe, you can counter people from building MR into you, but what if they don't build MR? If they see your early Void Staff and they don't build magic resist, now you miss out on a lot of damage, because the 40% magic pen is not going to do that much. Building a Stormsuit, for example, would deal a lot more damage when they don't have that magic resist. So that's the issue with Void Staff. Ideally, you would build it early, but you can't really do it. Right? Crit Bloom kind of fixes that. Crit Bloom says, okay, I'm going to build a magic penetration item second, so now they can't counter me anymore because I already have that magic penetration, and I freed up my build. That's what this means, freeing up the build. I freed up my build by building magic resist early and death cap third. Now I get to choose what I want for my 4th, 5th, and 6th item. I am not forced to build a death cap or a void there, which is really, really nice. We get that out of the way, right? Now, again, why can you do this with Crit Bloom and not with Void? Because Crit Bloom does not only give you that percentage pen, it gives you also 20 ability haste, which is really useful in the early game. And like I said with the Ionian boots, you need to build ability haste early on. It makes more sense to build it early on than in late game, because early on it has a bigger effect because your ability cooldowns are just higher in the early game. So that's why this is a magic penetration item that you can build early. Now, I still have an issue with this. This, you can still get kind of countered. Why? It's not as effective as the 40% magic penetration from the Void. It only gives you 30% magic penetration. So this means that enemies could see, okay, he has a Crit Bloom. and now they built magic resist, and they still kind of counter you, because 30% magic pen is good, but it's not that good. So it's not like this is the best item when they build magic resist. Void stuff is absolutely just the best item when they build magic resist. So this is like a guarantee. Like, okay, I free up my build. I get this early. It's a good item early because of the ability haste. And it somewhat counters enemy team stacking magic resist. But it's not ideal, right? So it is possible to go this build, but I don't like it, right? Therefore, I like to go, if you wanted to go something like this, just go death cap instantly and then probably just go avoid. Now, why is that? What is my thought process behind that? Again, like, I typically, this is risking it, right? Yeah, or like not, you're kind of trying to play it safe by building a magic pen item this early, and it's still good because it gives ability haste, but it's also kind of not that good, and it's not that like risk management-y, right? Because they can still build a lot of MR, and you only get 30 magic pen in the end. So what if they now start stacking MR? Now this item becomes not that valuable anymore. So what I would do then is very simple. I would typically just flip it. I just build my rocket belt, right? And then when I'm fat, I build Death Cap or just Riftmaker. And then when I see that they start building MR, I just go with the Void and I skip the Crypt Bloom. Right? That is my favorite part. But I do get the idea behind the build. I'm not a big fan of it because this build is saying I'm going to do risk management on my build, but it's not going to be the optimal build in a lot of scenarios. It's going to be a good build, but not the most optimal one. Like right from the get-go, you go into the game with the mentality of, I'm not going for the most optimal build, I'm going for the safest build. Which is fine, this works almost every game, but it's not the most optimal build. So for people who don't know a lot about builds, this is the perfect build. Right? I would do it like this then. This is the perfect build for people who don't know a lot about builds. You could go this every game. But then again, I don't really enjoy this, right? It's like instantly saying I'm not going to go for the optimal build. All right, enough yapping about that. Now, I already talked about it if you play versus shorter range bruiser comps. So if you play versus 3 melee champions in the enemy teams that are bruisers, right? Like a Yasuo and Ambessa, they are not that tanky, but they are kind of tanky, right? And instead of going Rocket Belt, go the Cosmic Drive. Because these type of champions like Ambessa, it's easy for you to attack them, but it's not easy for you to stay onto them. So then Cosmic Drive will help you out a lot with that, a lot better than Rocket Belt. So in those comps, you go Cosmic Drive, right? And that's why in top lane, you will see Vladimir players go Cosmic Drive almost always over Rocket Belt, unless they play into a Cannon or a Quinn or something. Because in top lane, most of the time, you play against those bruiser melee champions like Ambessa or something, right? Or Darius. And then you just get a lot more value from the Cosmic Drive. So in those comps, go Cosmic Drive, right? It's the same build as the Rocket Belt build here. You just change the Rocket Belt with a Cosmic Drive, and then you go Riftmaker, Decap, Void. And once again, if you are fat, so you go Cosmic Drive, and now you are really strong, you get a triple kill, build into your Death Cap if you have enough gold for a needlessly large rod, right? And then if they then go into your Riftmaker and then into your Void. And what if you see that once you want to start building into Riftmaker, you see that they build Magic Resist, build your Void stuff first, and then build a Riftmaker, for example, right? So that is how you can go about these builds. All right, let's go to the next one. If we play versus very tanky team comp, so like Sion top lane, a Mumu jungle, Leona support, right? Like really strong tanks that you're not going to get through, or like Cho'Gath, right? Those HP stacking champions, just go Liandry's, right? And then if you go Liandry's, I feel like you are kind of forced to go Riftmaker, right? And I feel like, why is that? Well, these items just synergize so well. One, this gives you HP, which it fuels the Riftmaker passive here, right? That's one. Two, Liandry's have a burn for 3 seconds. Your Riftmaker says the longer you are in combat, right, the more strength you will gain from this item. Right, you will get extra bonus damage and you will get Omnivamp, right, extra healing. Now the thing is, yeah, that just like once you get out of combat, this buff is removed. Liandry's helps you to keep up that buff. You attack somebody, Riftmaker starts proccing, and now for 3 seconds Liandry burns. So for 3 seconds you have extra damage that keeps on refreshing your Riftmaker timer. That's why this is such a good combination, right? Your Riftmaker passive keeps on being stacked because of the Liandry's burn. That's why this synergizes so well. And if you play into those HP stacking champions like a Sion, like a Cho'Gath, You need max health damage, which is what Liandry gives you. And then the synergy with Riftmaker is just too good to pass on, right? So a Liandry's build without Riftmaker doesn't make too much sense in my opinion, right? At least when you're playing versus tanky team comps. All right. Now, then after Riftmaker, what do you go? It's very simple. Again, you go with Deathcap, third item, ideal. Do you see that, like in tanky team comps, you will see like a Scion. They will typically also build not HP, but also magic resist very early on. So a lot of the time into these tankier team comps, you will have to do this. Build Liandry's, Riftmaker, and then Void. Right? Because they will already have magic resist on their first and second item. And yes, you could go Deathcap, but you're going to be better with this. You're going to deal more damage with this. But again, is Vladimir a tank shredder? No. So do you have to have the maximum amount of damage versus that Scion? No, it shouldn't be your job to kill the Scion. So whereas you still want to itemize against it, to make sure that like the entire enemy team is tanky, you need to itemize against them. You also still need to one-shot the squishy ADC. And therefore, I still prefer going Deathcap over the Void stuff because my job shouldn't be to constantly fight the Amumu and Scion. Right? I need to be able to deal with them, but I also need to have the damage to one-shot the ADC. So therefore, I like this. And once I have Deathcap, I'm a little bit weaker against the Scion instead of when I would have Void. But I will be better at one-tapping the Draven or the Jinx or whatever. Right? That's why I prefer this build. But again, I'm here to give you all the information. So if you play Vladimir top lane, a lot of the time you will have to go this. Because as Vladimir top lane, a lot of the time you will have to be the one that matches the enemy top laner. Right? If they have a Scion and you're mid lane, well, your top laner can deal with the Scion, right? But if you're top lane and they have a Scion, you're supposed to deal with him. And then especially when you don't have a Vayne, when you have like a Jhin ADC, and your mid laner is also something like a Zed, how are you going to get through the Scion? Nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody will stop him. So then you will have to stop him in the lane. And your job that game will not be to team fight, but your job will be to stop the Scion from pushing and taking all your towers. And then in those games, going Void third is better as well. So also keep that in mind. But that's my take on those tankier builds. And then last but not least, or like almost last, if you are solo AP, so you are the only AP champion on your team, and the enemy team has a full squishy team comp, like a Lucian Nami, like you can easily blow them up, right? Just go Storm Surge, right? It does flat magic penetration. They shouldn't build magic resist, so flat magic penetration items like Shadow Flame and Storm Surge are really, really good. Now, if flat magic penetration items are really good against those squishier team comps, right? And you are solo AP, so they shouldn't build magic resist into you. Why not go all the flat magic penetration items? Why not go Storm Surge and Shadow Flame here, and then Deathcap, for example? Well, the problem is, yes, this would theoretically deal more damage than going like even Storm Surge Shadow Flame, this combo would deal more damage than Storm Surge Deathcap, for example, right? Now, why do I still not love going Storm Surge Shadow Flame? I experimented with this build in the past, and I think I even included it in my build guide. But after playing it a lot more, I did notice that if you play in high elo, and theoretically you are solo AP and enemies shouldn't build magic resist into you, if you go this build, they will see, oh wait, Vladimir is solo AP, he is building full magic penetration items, so normally we wouldn't build magic resist into him, but because he's itemizing this way, it just gives us a lot of value if we do start building a little bit of magic resist even, like Mercury threats or something, right? Or like a Witsend or a Malphma Morses on a Lucian or something, right? And now your build kind of gets countered anyway. So it just gives too much counter opportunity again to the enemy team to go 2 magic penetration items. So then first I would go with Deathcap, for example. And once I have my magic penetration item, whether this is a Crypt Bloom, a Bloodletter's Curse, or a Void Staff, only then would I consider building a Shadow Flame. Because again, keep in mind, flat magic penetration becomes a lot stronger after magic penetration, percentage pen, right? So this way enemies can now see, oh, he is going full flat magic pen, let's build magic resist and we counter him. This way you only have 1 flat magic penetration item, they will not build magic resist. Then once you have your percentage magic penetration items, so to make sure that they can't counter you, now you get a lot of value of building flat penetration again. So now if you wanted to, you could go with Shadow Flame again, after you have your magic penetration item, your percentage-wise, right? If that makes sense. Now, why did I put Crit Bloom here? Why did I not put Bloodletter's Curse here or Void Staff? Well, Bloodletter's Curse is an item that makes you tankier, right? A lot of health and ability haste. So into squishy enemy team comps, you don't really need that. You just look to blow them up. So then you don't really need any items with HP. So that's why I didn't include any in this build, right? So that's 1. 2, also, what is the thing with this? Why not a Void Staff then? Because it would even deal more damage. Well, not really, because 1, they shouldn't stack magic resist into you. So you don't need the full 40% of Void. You can only go with 30. Because you are solo AP, they shouldn't stack magic resist only against you, because they will need armor for the rest of your team. So you don't need all the percentage span. And, so that's 1. And 2, ability haste. If you go this build, not one of these items gives ability haste, but Vladimir needs ability haste. So the fact that you don't need the full pen from Void Staff, and this gives some ability haste, this is just a better item in this build, right? So that is why I came up with this build. It does counter enemies from going magic resist into you, and you get ability haste, which makes your build a lot more viable. Right? You could also do this, like literally Storm Surge into Crit Bloom, but again, it doesn't make too much sense because enemies shouldn't build magic resist into you. But once you have like this and Death Cap, now you will start one-tapping enemies, ADCs and stuff. Now they might start thinking, oh, I need some magic resist, like a little bit. And then you build this, you counter them from building the magic resist, and it's only a little bit, so you don't need to void, right? And you get the ability haste from this. So it makes a lot of sense, right? And then going Zhonya's, Riftmaker you could go, Shadow Flame you could go, right? Just go with whatever you want at this point. Now, there is also a build where you could go something like this, where you go like a mixture. And I'm pretty sure that I included this in my previous guide, where you say, I'm going to do a mixture here. I'm going to go something like, yeah, I don't know, like this, right? So I'm going to get myself some HP and like one-tap potential. So now you're decent against bruisers and you're good against squishies, right? Is that also an opportunity? Yes. Have I experimented with it a lot? No. While making this video, I was thinking of experimenting with this later on again to see if this is a good build. But honestly, I don't think this is the best build. I think the other builds are just a little bit better right now. I don't think this is necessary, right? Because this is basically saying, I want to be good against squishies and I want to be good against those bruiser type champions. But in reality, if you go this build here, the standard build against the ranged, this already one-taps. Rocket Belt, 70 AP and 70 AP from Riftmaker, this one-tap squishies and you're super tanky. So this is basically saying, oh, I need like a super damaging item to one-tap the squishies and then I need like an item to deal with the bruisers. Not really, right? You literally already one-tap them if you don't go that super strong Storm Surge item to one-tap people. You literally one-tap them with this. So in theory, this makes a lot of sense, but in practice, you don't even need it, so you can just ignore it, right? That was just to circle back to my previous video. And then here, something else I did want to mention. This is not a build, but it's something that I want to include. If you play against enemy team comps that are fully AD or like full AP, or they have like mainly AD damage or AP damage, that means that you will want to stack some armor and some magic resist, right? So you will want to stack some, like you will want to buy a Banshees or a Spirit Visage or a Zhonya's, right? Some armor or some magic resist. Now, I want to say that a lot of people don't know this or they don't keep this in mind, but if you play against those team comps and you are building magic resist and armor, build HP items, right? If I get out of my words, build HP items because you become a lot stronger. Like people think that stacking resistances is really valuable. And no, that's not true. The more armor you get, the more magic resist you get, the more diminishing returns, the less like you spend a lot of gold for less and less armor value and less magic damage reduction. So you have diminishing returns, right? Also, enemies will build armor penetration and magic penetration. So the more you stack, the more value they get from those items. So in my opinion, it's better to build some armor, some magic resist, and then complete your build with HP items. So build a Banshees, I'll give you a clear example. Let's say they have like a basically full AD team, right? Build a Zhonya's, which gives you 50 armor, and then proceed to build HP items. Like a Riftmaker that gives 350 HP, a Rocket Belt 300 health, a Cosmic Drive 350, Liandry's 300, Bloodletter's Curse 400, right? Because then you have some resistances. You're not overloading them. You're not getting diminishing returns on how much resistances you're buying. You're not giving them an insane amount of value from their Black Cleaver and stuff. But you are having some resistance and a lot of HP. So you're going to be quite tanky to get through. Right? That is, in my opinion, a lot better than Vladimir's going armor, like plated steel caps with the Zhonyas, with a Frozen Heart. It's just not that good. Like, the more armor you stack, the more diminishing returns and gold value, and the more value they get from their armor penetration items, for example. It's the same with magic, right? With magic damage. Just go a Banshee's Veil or Spirit Visage, build one magic resist item, and then proceed to stack HP items rather than resistance items. If that makes sense. That is my take on that as well. But yeah, that's everything I wanted to say. And then one last thing. I know it's been a long video, but one last thing. This is the ultimate build guide for Vladimir. So I mentioned here the Crypt Bloom and the Voids. At any part of these builds, can you replace the Void Staff or the Crypt Bloom with a Bloodletter's Curse, right? So I didn't fully explain Bloodletter's Curse, so let me do that now. You can't just like remove your Void Staff for a Bloodletter's Curse, right? Why? What is the difference between this and the other items, right? This is really good when you have a lot of AP on your team. When you have like that, when you have a Kael top lane, a Lux support, and a Vladimir mid. Because this not only like makes you deal more damage towards the enemies and like go through their magic resist, it makes sure that you shred their magic resist. So that means your teammates will also deal up to 30% more damage to the enemies. So if you are solo AP, yeah, you shouldn't, like, theoretically you shouldn't go this. Because yeah, you're not really, like, if you are solo AP, you can just, like, one, you don't need these items. You need flat magic penetration and not percentage pen. But like, if you don't have that much AP in your team, then you don't get a lot of value from lowering enemies their MR because you're the only one hitting them, right? Then you might as well go an item with more magic pen. But if you have lots of AP on your team, that's when this becomes really, really valuable, right? Now, again, that is how it theoretically works. I'm here to say that I like it even in all the scenarios. You could replace every Void or Crypt Bloom here with a Bloodletter's Curse. And why is that? Because I don't care too much about the shred. I mainly care about the fact that and it gives magic penetration shred, and it gives ability power and health and ability haste. So it just gives you all the stats that you need. So even though in a certain game Void Staff might give you a bit more damage, this item gives you so much more stats that it just is better. Right? That's what I have been experimenting with. That's why I say that Bloodletter's Curse here, I really like that item, and you can't just use it always as your magic penetration item, right? So keep that in mind as well. The only really reason when I would not buy this, or the scenario when I would not buy this, is when the enemies are having lots of magic resist and you really need the most possible magic penetration that you could have, and then you should go with the Void Staff. But in all other scenarios, you can just replace your magic penetration items here, your Void Staffs and your Crypt Bloom, with a Bloodletter's Curse. And then again, I didn't include the boots in all of these builds because I explained when to go which boots in general, right? You should just follow those rules and then finish your builds accordingly. But that is everything here about the Vladimir builds. It is very logical to me, but yes, it is quite a bit. There are a lot of options, but this makes a lot of sense to me, and now I hope that it does to you. Again, this is really going super in-depth, too in-depth. You don't need this knowledge to climb. It's really just for enthusiasts of Vladimir, right? Keep that in mind. You could literally go either this build every, this build every game, or this build every game. So this into the shorter range comps, this into the longer range comps, and literally you will have the perfect build almost every game. The other builds are just my brain thinking about the ideal optimal scenarios, but that's kind of it. Like, you don't need to know anything more than just, you either go this build in longer range comps, and then you swap out the rocket belt with the cosmic drive in shorter range comps. That's it. That's really it. That's the conclusion of this video. But yeah, there you go. You have all the builds. You have my take on the builds. If you have some fun builds yourself, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it, and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching. Bye.